Brian Higgins.
Alrighty, rolled along here on this Monday, an Olympic Monday. The U.S. women up to 100 now, just thumping Japan at a rematch of the gold medal game from the Tokyo Olympic Games. Stewie, 22 points for Syracuse's own Brianna Stewart. We'll talk a little more Olympics when we get on later in the program today. But right now, it is time to talk some college basketball with our guy, CJ Moore from The Athletic, who's been hard at work on this College Hoops Confidential series over the course of the last few weeks. CJ, welcome into the show. And man, it must be fascinating for you guys to do this confidential stuff, to get all this great info, kind of, on the record with no names here during the summer, to see what people are really thinking about all this stuff going on.
Yeah, it was pretty insightful. We talked to a lot of different people and tried to get thoughts from every side of it, whether it be the agents, the collective folks, the players, the coaches. Wanted to give people like a really, really good idea of how things operate in this new world. I think our final doc had like 81,000 words of transcribed interviews, so we had a lot to work off of.
And I'd say it's telling, right? Like, if you did this, I don't know, 5 years ago, you would have talked to the players and the coaches, and that would have been the list. And now it's agents, and you talk about collective people. I'm going to guess coming up in the future, you'll be talking to team GMs and all that. How weird is it now to explore all these other avenues, I guess, of what goes on in the offseason as we try to make the rosters up for the year to come in college hoops?
Well, I think the sport and how you roster build has just totally changed. And, when I just talk to random people that find out what I do, I think that's what they're curious about. Like, my job has really changed here in the last few years because I think the beginning of the off season is a much busier time because, players are changing teams, and it's a very, very quick recruiting season. Obviously, that time of year when players are transferring has become the most important time for 90% of college basketball. There are still some programs that build, mostly through the high school ranks, but for a lot of programs, they're either trying to hold on to their players or bring in new ones, and that rush to build the rosters in like the month of April and May has totally changed the sport and what the offseason looks like.
CJ, I think in many ways, like salary management, roster management is the most fascinating part of all these things. And obviously, I know the head coaches always say, we don't have anything to do with that on the record. How'd you find that, when you get them off the record here a little bit of how people get to figure out where that collective money is going and who it's going to, and, how that process works?
Yeah, there are a few coaches that will say they try not to involve themselves in that, but I'm pretty skeptical when they tell me that. I think a majority of places, the coach is basically managing the salary cap and for the salary pool and trying to figure out who they're going to pay what. And that's become a big part of it. Like, you've got to be really intentional and smart in how you're spending your money. You've got to be, really, really out there and trying to fundraise because, there was one coach who said something like, I used to worry when a guy would get a job, how good a coach, how good a recruiter he was. Now I worry less about that. And I worry, like, if he's a good coach and he has a good NIL budget, that could be dangerous. So it's less about whether you're a good recruiter and almost more about, what are you offering and are you smart about the guys that you are offering and what you're paying them?
Yeah, when you're talking to the players, was your sense that, what percentage do you think, CJ, were just literally taking the highest offer? Are they taking, like, the highest few offers and then deciding on a best fit? What was your general sense of how guys are approaching their time in the portal?
I think a lot of them try to figure out what they're worth and get a ballpark idea, and then not necessarily take the highest offer, but that's when it comes into, okay, how are you going to develop me? What's my role going to be? how will I look for the next level depending on which school I go to. I think a lot of guys I talked to didn't, at least they claimed they didn't take the highest offer, but I do think most of them were, those schools were in the ballpark or at least close. And if you can get to that in the ballpark, and then it becomes what's your sales pitch and who can sell the guy on the best. But there are some schools that are just priced out of a lot of recruitments.
C.J. Moore with us from The Athletic, talking about their College Basketball Confidential series he did with Brendan Marks and Kyle Tucker and others. A lot of interviews and behind the scenes, and a lot of great articles you can go check out from the last few weeks. What's the most interesting thing you heard, C.J.? What story hit you? You're like, whoa, that's nuts.
I think it's some of the lying that goes on during this time, and there's one story of a coach who said we had a kid come on campus, and it was a guy we had recruited before, and he comes and he had been hurt the year before. And he comes to visit, and his agent tells him, we're looking for this amount, and this school's going to offer this, yada yada yada. And then he goes to another school right after that, and his agent right before he goes tells him, hey, this guy was just at school X, and they were going to offer him this, but now they're offering this because they saw him practice, or they saw him play against their guys and pick up, and man, he just tore it up. And that coach at the previous school where he had visited told me we didn't even have enough guys on campus to have a pickup game. Like, he didn't play while he was here. So some of the gamesmanship and just blatant lies that I think are going on behind the scenes, and I'm sure it's not just coaches or it's not just agents lying. There's probably some coaches lying. There's probably some players lying, but that was probably the most like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe stuff like that's happening.
I said one of the things that popped out in one of your articles there was how many agents are calling up saying they're representing a guy. When they're not, or they might be later. Yeah. That part sounded totally crazy. I don't know how you deal with that if you're a coach.
Yeah, or a player. How about agents calling around, acting like they're representing you, and you haven't even come to a deal with them, or in some cases, barely ever talked to that guy. So, you might be a player who gets a bad reputation because of some guy that's out there trying to act like he's representing you when he doesn't actually represent you.
Yeah, I mean, think about this. In the NBA or the NFL, right? There are some rules around agents. I know there are some for this, but it's still the Wild West. Like if you're a pro basketball player, you kind of at least know the deal. If you're 17 years old, right? How do you navigate this world right now when you're a high school kid or a college kid dealing with all this stuff?
And I think that's what's really difficult is there are some good agents out there and who have the best interests of the players at heart, but I think there are also some agents out there that are just in this to grab a quick buck and aren't necessarily looking out for the players like they should be, and in some cases are charging them 20%, which seems like just a crazy fee, especially with these collective deals when sometimes the deal's going to be what they are. Maybe they can drive it up a little bit, but in professional ranks, the NBA, they're getting I think 3 or 4%, and to get 20% just seems insane.
Yeah, it's way out of whack with what they're actually doing for the kids. That's for sure. So we got C.J. Moore with us here. What was your sense at how different high school recruiting is now because of the portal? Are these guys just second in line? How different is it to be a high school kid coming out now based on how the portal is working?
Yeah, I think there's a way less priority put on it by a lot of college programs. They're going to these games, these grassroots games, but I do think there are some coaches that end up skipping more stuff than they used to. The recruitments are much different. They're sometimes later now because, if you're a high school kid and you're not signed by if you're not committed by September, they might just wait and see if you're still around in the spring because they want to know what they can get in the portal. So a lot of pretty good high school players have probably gotten passed over the last couple of years, and maybe are going to end up at lower levels and mid-major levels that in the past they might have been high major guys, and then it just makes it go around even more, because then you got even better players at the mid-major level who eventually are probably going to transfer.
Yeah, then they loop themselves eventually back up to the top level. How far down like the recruiting list do you think that goes? Like, obviously, like a top 10 guy's gonna find a spot. Is it like the top 100 guys? Where do you think like the line is that guys that can handle their recruiting like normal versus guys that have to deal with this new reality?
I think when you're past like 50, maybe 100, I think those are guys that are getting impacted by this, and their recruitments that don't look like what they used to look like for, let's say you're the 92nd player in the country, best player in the country. In the past, you probably had more high major offers at this point in time, sitting here today on July 29th, than you would have, and than you do now. You would have had, 10 years ago, maybe you had like 5 offers, and now you have 1 from a high major. So I do think it has changed the game for those guys. The 5 stars obviously are going to be pursued pretty heavily still. But even those guys, like when it comes to resources and money spent, like I think a lot of schools would rather pay for a really, really high level transfer than a 5-star kid.
Yeah, then realistically, you might only be getting 1 year out of either of them. Do you want 1 year of an 18-year-old or 1 year of a 22-year-old in those circumstances? CJ, the other thing that's actively going on right now, a lot of it sort of dropped on Friday that we're still waiting, is this House NCAA settlement. I think so much of that has been focused on football. Do you have a sense of how that's going to affect basketball, or if there's benefits, detriments, where it's going to land here, who it might benefit the most?
Well, I'd encourage your listeners to go to the Athletic today. Kyle Tucker and I actually have a story on the House and how it'll affect basketball that dropped today. But, I think talking to coaches this summer, I think that's something they're very interested in, to see like how much of the pie are they going to get, how the money is going to be distributed among the different sports, how does Title IX come into play, as far as like are schools going to try to even the money out a little bit because of Title IX. I've talked to a lawyer who thinks that Title IX shouldn't play a factor here, that schools shouldn't be worried about that, but he says some are probably going to be worried about it. So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions when it comes to the House settlement and how that money will be dispersed. And there's some schools that I think one misnomer about it is people think that they can spend $22 million on players now. Well, they're just going to have that money to spend on those players, right? Well, no, you still got to go. Like talking to a guy that kind of works on the fundraising side at a big school, he's like, we still got to go raise that money.
Right.
Like we got to figure out how we can get that $22 million in our budget. Like the NCAA is not just giving us $22 million to spend.
Yeah, that's the thing. They said, hey, you can spend $22 million. They're like, great. Where we don't have that. What $22 million? What are you talking about? Where's that money? So I think that's going to be really fascinating to see how it plays out. All right, before I let you go, CJ, I got to ask you a little bit about Syracuse. Obviously, Red Autry was heavily involved in the portal this offseason, bringing in 4 new guys. You have any off-season thoughts here on the Orange as we get ready to go for Red's second year?
No, I know they brought in some good ones. They lost a couple good ones. I think it's I think that he maybe overperformed a little bit the first year, just based on what their roster looked like a year ago. But people in Syracuse have such high expectations when it comes to basketball. I think this is a really, really important year for him. And none of the transfers really, I think maybe Eddie Lampkin was the only guy that we had in our rankings list. So it's not like a transfer haul that really jumps out and they're like, oh man, I can't believe he got this guy. But I'd also say that this time a year ago, I think Dalton Connect, we had him maybe ranked in like the 40s or something like that, and he ended up an All-American. So you never know how guys will do in a new system, and it's really, really hard to project these mid-major guys, but he's probably doing it the right way, going and grabbing a couple portal guys, a couple high-level recruits, and that's what it's like these days. You can flip it really quickly, so we'll see. But it's definitely not a roster that I'm considering for preseason top 25 or anything like that at this point.
Yeah, it's hey, 4 portal guys, but they're all, that veteran 4th, 5th year guy kind of thing, which tells you what the, recruiting transfer landscape is like these days. All right, CJ, good stuff. Always great to chat. Be sure to check out all his stuff on The Athletic. These behind the scenes articles are fascinating with the info they get. But thanks so much for hopping on, CJ. I'm sure we'll talk again when we get closer to the season. All right.
All right, thanks for having me. Take care.
There is CJ Moore again. Check out all these stuff on The Athletic, the College Basketball Confidential series. He and Brendan Marks and Kyle Tucker handled all of that. And it's, what do you say, he talked with more than 80 some odd people. It's coaches, athletes, agents. These, man, you talk about agents being shady. A lot these NIL agents, whoo boy, man, watch out for them. There's some stuff going on now. But fascinating stuff to check out behind the scenes. All right, we'll hit a break. Phone lines open next, 315-437-7644. Much more to get to after this. Talk a little New York Football Giants next hour with our guy Jordan Renaud. We're back after this here on Q Sports Talk and ESPN.